In today's video tutorial, we're going to look at how SketchUp can support an interior designer when they are making space planning considerations. So space planning is all about making sure an interior is balanced and harmonious, not only visually, but also on a practical level so that it is functional. So that will take into consideration things like architectural features, if there's any current focal points, the location of windows and doors. It will also look at how the client is going to use the space, and especially if they have children or pets, and especially again if it's open plan, because they will need to consider zoning requirements. And so there's a lot that goes into this initial stage of the interior design process, and it's very important that the interior designer understands fully what the client is going to be using the space for, how they're going to flow through the space. So traffic flow and circulation is also very important. And that's also why it's crucial that you have a client brief that is as detailed and relevant as possible, so that the interior designer has a very good understanding as to what the space is going to be used for. So what I'm going to do is go into my SketchUp file that contains all of my most commonly used components. And obviously you could create a library with these components, and I show you how to do that in course 3. I also provide these pre-constructed components in course 3 as well. And what I'm going to do is just select the sofa and copy that and paste it into this floor plan. So I'm just going to rotate that around because I want it to sit right here, just in front of that window, nice and centrally. So you can see that that's been centered in that window. I'm not too worried about specific dimensions of where everything is being located just yet. At the minute, as a starting point, I just want to start placing things to see how things are looking. Then after I'm happy with where everything is, I can then fine tune and start being very specific about the dimensions of where things are being placed. So I think that's a great size for this wall. This is a media unit and a TV. And this is obviously the desk and the chair right here. So I need to take into consideration these areas when I'm putting in furniture in the living area. So what I'm going to do is let's go and take a look at the larger sofa and paste this in here. It doesn't need to be 3-seater. I can still make it 2-seater. And immediately I'm not happy with that. It's just too large. Even if it was a 2-seater, it's still too large. It's encroaching in the space here for the home office, and it's just making this whole area very claustrophobic. And I think I want to make this window here, which is a huge feature of this room, more prominent. And if there was a large sofa in front of that, I don't think it would work very well. So let's remove that and let's try placing a smaller sofa in there. And whilst that could work, I would rather have more statement pieces in here because it's quite a contemporary space and the client has already stipulated that they are very fond of mid-century design. So what I'm going to do is remove that, and I actually have some pre-constructed mid-century statement chairs right here, and I think I will place those right here. But what I'm going to do to make sure I'm using dimensions of those chairs that are pretty accurate, let me just measure the sofa. So that's 1,800 by 900. So that would be a standard size. So I'm pretty happy with that. I just want to make sure that I'm using dimensions of a mid-century chair that are, close to what they are at the minute. So I'm just going to go to a website that has a mid-century chair, and I'm going to double check the dimensions. So the depth is 54 and the width is 54. Let's just confirm that with this chair. Okay, so that's 683 and 600. Okay, so the one that I'm using is larger. So what I'm going to do is edit this so that it is a closer representation of the type of chair that I'm thinking of, which is this. Okay, so this is an example of how SketchUp supports efficiency with regards to this process. So, if you were hand drawing, you would have to draw this by hand again to try and make sure that it's the right size. And, it takes longer. It's a longer process. It's more drawn out. And if you want to make revisions, that's really where it starts to become an issue. So what I'm going to do is copy this into a new file, because I'm going to show you a really useful way to resize a symbol, but you need to do it in a new file, because when it resizes everything proportionately. So I don't want to have anything else in with it when I resize it. So what I'm going to do is use my tape measure tool and just measure right here, and then I'm going to type in 540. Do you want to resize the model? Yes. And I'm just going to delete that guide. And now if I measure right here, it's now 540, okay? But this is still not going to be the same size. It's not going to be 540, which is what this chair is. Let me just double check that. 540 in depth, okay. So in order to change that, what I'm going to do is use my tape measure tool and just type 540. And then I'm going to use the scale tool and bring that along until it clicks onto that guideline. Let's remove the guide and let's double check this measurement, and it's 540. So now that chair is exactly the same size as the chair that I'm considering for this room. And there it is there, the proper size. Okay? Let's include another one. Great. And what I want to do as well is include a rug. So let's take a look at a rug. We're going to use heels as an example. So we're using real life dimensions to help us with regards to accuracy and precision and scale and proportion when we're considering our space planning. So let's create a rug that's 170 by 240. Okay, so here, that's the actual size of this rug right here. So let's just draw that. That's I'm working in millimeters. Whoops, let's just try that again. So that's 1700 by 240. And let's just connect that line, and there's our rug. So I'm just going to make this into a group so that I can move it around and it doesn't impact any other geometry in this floor plan. And I don't think the rug at that orientation works very well. Let's rotate that around. And you can see instantly that that looks much better. So I'm just going to position that right here. And what I'm going to do to try and center it without using any specific dimensions is this guide right here is actually at the center of the width of this rug. So I'm going to line it up with the center of this sofa. So it's kind of centered. Okay? That's a really good indication of trying to center that without using any dimensions. As I said, I will go back later and make sure that everything is precise. So now what I'm going to do, now that the rug has provided context to this living area, I'm actually going to move these chairs down. So let's move these here. Great. And they're a little bit too far apart, I think. Let's just move that in a little. That's much better. And let's just zoom in a bit. And there we go. How does that look? Great. And what I'm going to do now is add a coffee table. Because this is clearly a little bit of an entertaining space. And I just want to make sure that there is enough functionality with regards to entertaining and, you know, storage and being able to rest drinks or food or magazines or whatever on a coffee table. And I think it's also very important to note as well that it's important that this seating is also centered around the TV as well. You know, that is important. And whilst also giving a nice little bit of circulation around here with regards to the window. And now we have a little bit of space to put a side table here and also another side table here. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's just add a coffee table here. So let me just go in here to take a look at the sizes of coffee tables. And this one is 90 by 90. So let's try that one. So I'm just going to draw that out. 900 by 900. So that's one way that you can create that table. Or you can use the rectangle tool, click and drag, and then type 900 by 900. There's always more than one way to do anything in SketchUp. So let's just bring that over. Oh yes, that's perfection. That is nicely in proportion. I just don't feel a rectangle would work in this scenario, but a nice square coffee table definitely does. And the one thing that you need to remember with coffee tables when it comes to circulation space is leaving enough space around the furniture so that people can walk in between the coffee table. So let's just move that up a little. And I think that's in a really good space and a really good area of the rug. You know, it's fairly centered to the sofa. It isn't centered to these two chairs, but that's because you need to have circulation around the sofa or in between the sofa and the table. But I'm pretty happy with that. What I'm going to do now is add a side table. So standard sizes of side tables are like 45 centimeters. So let's do a side table of 450 by 450. Let's make that into a group so we can move it around. You could also make it into a component if you were going to make a duplicate, so that if you change the size of one, that was reflected in the other. And I would recommend that you create components as opposed to groups. So let's create a copy of that and place it over here. So this is quite good. Let's just fine tune the position of those. This is quite good for creating balance because we have a little bit of symmetry going on here with regards to this wall here. That all helps to add a focal point to the room. But it is a little bit cluttered here with regards to the media unit. So you might consider making the media unit not quite as long here, or you might consider just removing this side table altogether. You know, I know that in more traditional spaces, symmetry would be the preference, but this is a contemporary space, and therefore things like traditional arrangements when it comes to furniture layouts wouldn't be as strictly adhered to. So in this scenario, I'm just going to leave that side table here on one side. And what you could also do is create a circular side table, a smaller one, to go on the side of, well, it could go either here, or what you could do is increase the distance in between the two chairs and place it in between the two chairs, like that. So this is why SketchUp is great again, because it gives you the flexibility to play around with different layouts as you're going through the space planning process. But you know what? I don't really like that. So let's just undo that. And I don't really like that either. So I'm just going to take all of that out. It's looking a little cluttered. So again, this is looking at how someone's going to move through the space, how it looks visually. And I just like having this little area here free of anything, because sometimes, you know, just having space and not putting anything in it is all you need. You don't, you know, because you have space, it doesn't mean that you have to fill it with something. And it's also very important for this area here when you're moving in and out of this area day to day when you're working, that you have space to do that. And also don't forget that there's an entryway in here as well. People are going to be coming and moving in and around. So I just think having the distinction and a little bit of white space would be actually very good in this area. So this is obviously the kitchen area right here, and I think this is obviously going to be a natural area for dining. So let's take a look at some dining table sizes. I think we'll look at a circular one initially to see how that will look. Now, what size is this? So you can see this is 150 centimeters, and when you create a circle in SketchUp, you actually use the radius. So let's type in 750. Let's double check that measurement. 1500, great. Let's just very quickly make that into a group, and let's just bring it over here, and you can see instantly, guys, that table is just far too big for the area allocated for dining. It's just taking over this entire area. And with regards to movement and circulation, by the time you put a chair in here as well, this is going to be encroaching in the kitchen area space, and it just isn't practical. And visually, it's going to overpower that entire area. So let's remove that. Although circular tables do take up more space anyway. So let's remove that and let's look at another option. So let's take a look at more rectangular sized tables. Let's try, let me see. Let's try this. So what dimension is this? So that's 152 by 76. So that's 152 by 76. Let's close that rectangle. Let's make that into a group. Let's bring it over, and you can see instantly that it's much better. Much better. It's much better with regards to this area here. It's in proportion and in scale to the actual wall that's here. It's a nice little size that way. I don't think it'll work as well changing the orientation. And no, it doesn't. It's just, it just doesn't work at all. It's because it's encroaching too much up here. So let's just undo that rotation that we did. Okay. And I actually think we could probably do with making that shorter again. Let's just cut that in half and remove the geometry that we don't need. No, that's too small. Let's just make it a little larger. And that's quite nice. You could just move that over a little. And that's quite a nice size for that area. And you can also see that it's actually a nice size for that window. It isn't taking too much away from the window. It's complementing the window size, and that's really important, you know, just for overall aesthetics. So let's add some chairs, and I'm going to use these dimensions as a guide. So it's 47 in depth by 46, and I actually do have a very similar styled chair. It's a 2D component in my pre-constructed SketchUp file that I said is, available to download in course 3. So let's just copy that and paste it into this empty file, because I'm going to resize it the same way I did with the mid-century chair. So let's just measure this, and it's actually 527.3, and we want to make that 470. Do you want to resize the model? Yes. Let's just delete that guide. Although, to be honest, guys, when I go to delete guides, if there are other guides in that file, it will delete all of the guides. All of them, not just one. So let's just double check that depth, and it is 470. And you can see here that that is actually correct, because that's what it says right here. So the width is 46, and let's just do that and then scale that to fit. And there we have, well, let's just double check that, 459.5, close enough. Let's just remove that guide, and let's copy that and paste it into our floor plan. Okay, and let's just zoom in and position it. So there's the midpoint, and there's the midpoint of the table. And let's just do that. And let's create a duplicate. And let's just move that in a little closer. And now you can see that that fits in there beautifully. Very balanced. Nice proportion, nice scale. It's in proportion to everything else, and most importantly, the window, especially if there was a view right there, and you still want to make sure that the light's getting in and it's not obstructed. I think I've given you a really good indication as to how useful and effective SketchUp is at encouraging an efficient workflow when considering space planning. It basically just makes the whole thing a lot less painful if you were going to do it by hand. It's a lot quicker, and it's just a lot more professional looking as well. And obviously there's the accuracy and precision to keep in mind too. The one thing I want to show you as well, when you are getting to the stage that you're ready to present to your client, and you may be presenting, 2 or 3 different layouts, is to remove the geometry here, that it would be obscured by the table or something else on top of it. So what I'm going to do is just explode everything here, and then I am going to remove all of this geometry like this. You can see here that this curve is actually selecting this area too, and what should be happening is that all of the geometry that is cut by this line of the table should only be selected. So what I'm going to do is right click and select explode curve, and that means that you're able to select all of the individual segments that make up that curve. So what I'm going to do is just delete all of this geometry that we don't need, and that just looks much more professional. Even for a technical floor plan, it's just much more professional, which is very important as well. And it's really important, guys, that you remove all the stray geometry. Don't be leaving any stray geometry lying around, because that is not very professional, and it may affect your floor plan going forward. So as you can see, it looks so much better already. And that's it, guys. That is how SketchUp helps you with your space planning and provides you with a much more efficient workflow. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and don't forget to pop on to the SketchUp Hub for more resources and more content to help you when it comes to using SketchUp and creating professional floor plans and elevations. And you'll also find out more about the SketchUp courses that I sell.